So, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, Justin. Could you tell the audience a bit about yourself today?
So I'm Justin Jacobson. I'm an esports and entertainment attorney in New York City. I work with professional athletes, musicians, fashion designers, and professional gamers, coaches, streamers, teams, and tournament organizers. I help them with all their legal and business matters, including contract review and negotiation, trademark and copyright matters, visa and work authorization, as well as other related business and tax matters. I'm also very involved in brand development and marketing for esports talent. And I've recently started to work with Ford Models' newly created esports and gaming talent division, where we're working with some very unique gaming and esports talent, including pro players, coaches, and some teams.
Wow, that's a lot. So, the first question I wanted to ask is really basic, which is what is the difference between an attorney and a lawyer?
Literally, there's nothing. It's just the way you say it, an attorney, especially in America. I know in Britain there's a solicitor and a barrister, which is, kind of a distinction, but it's really just another word of saying, same way you say a doctor or your, medical practitioner. Yeah, so attorney and lawyer are the same.
Okay, well, that's hopefully cleared up that problem for a lot of people and not just me. You mentioned a lot of different areas you're involved in with regards to esports. Is that because most lawyers are staying quite generalist, or is that just the way you are in the sense of not specializing in one area of esports law?
Well, what's nice about, the entertainment law and the esports field is that when you're working with, creative talent and individuals in these brand driven spaces, there's just a lot of similarities. So the IP and the contract and kind of the business and tax stuff kind of all go hand in hand. So if you're really working with a talent or a team, you need to just be familiar with all of these immediate aspects in order for you to really provide value for your client.
So you're saying that because it's still new, most people have to stay generalist so that they can really help the client as much as possible.
I think it just makes you more valuable. And what's nice about it is in the other entertainment worlds, whether it's fashion or movies or TV, people that are, entertainment lawyers or fashion attorneys, they handle all of these different areas for, a fashion designer or a jewelry designer or a producer or a songwriter or a DJ. So it's really that's kind of how these talent driven legal fields have just evolved, where most people are just a bit more versatile because you need it in order to succeed. And it really is valuable for your client. Instead of having to have three different lawyers, you have one.
Hmm. That sounds nice, but I think the question a lot of people will have in their minds is it expensive? Is it expensive to retain an esports lawyer?
I mean, everything's relative. I think that, different law firms, especially some of the bigger ones, might have a bit more barrier to entry, especially on the price, than someone like me who's, running his own firm and has a bit more availability with pricing and how I can operate. But, if you're doing a six-figure or multi-million-dollar deal, then to spend a couple hundred or a couple thousand on legal fees is just, you know, pretty normal, absolutely something that you need to incorporate and understand. And that's kind of what my biggest challenge has been so far.
And you've kind of given me a nice entry to my next question, which is I think there are a lot of legal firms branching into esports because it's such a fast growing field. How would you advise people to discern the people that are simply following for the paycheck as opposed to knowing what they're talking about? How does the normal client make that call?
I mean, I think when you're looking at any professional driven person, whether it's an accounting, a wealth manager, or an attorney, you have to get recommendations. You have to see who they've worked with, what kind of work they're doing. Like you said, is this something where about, a couple months ago they just decided, oh, wow, look at Ninja, let's do esports? Or have you been working in this field? Have you done deals? You represent actual players or teams. What have you done? I think that the biggest thing you'll start to know is that once you start talking to people who are doing it, like, oh yeah, well last week I did a 100 Thieves deal, and before that was FaZe and Immortals and Cloud9, and I'm working on these Call of Duty Pro League contracts, and I think once you start talking to people who are really doing things consistently and are at this high level, you'll be able to discern who's real and who is just kind of jumping on the bandwagon.
You do cover a lot of things. In your experience, has there been a few areas around esports that you've been more involved in, or it just seems to be overrepresented in your work?
I mean, I would say most of it is really contract driven, whether it's reviewing player contracts or coach contracts or, sponsorship deals for talent or for teams. That would probably be the biggest area. But more recently, we've really grown in the esports and immigration side. And especially with previously, there were all these huge tournaments and people traveling globally to come to America to compete. So it's just a really huge budding industry. And it's just as a specialized area that you really need a unique knowledge of the immigration laws as well as the esports and professional gaming scene so you can understand how you can explain it to some of these immigration officers who probably have no idea what esports or PUBG or Rainbow Six is. They may have heard of Fortnite because their child is playing it, but other than that, this whole pro gaming world is just completely novel and new to them.
Yeah, I think that will be an ongoing conversation with so many different departments around the world. What have you seen as a struggle in your work? What's the biggest barrier in you being able to do what you want to do for your clients?
I think a lot of it is just really the talent themselves, really understanding the need for a professional or an attorney or just some other person in their corner that's maybe not their parent or their coach or their former teammate or some of these people that are in their ear most of the time. I think that that's been the biggest barrier and just the biggest issue I've encountered is people maybe not understanding the long-term value of, okay, maybe I'm paying, $1,000, $2,000 for a review of this 20, 30-page agreement. But the stuff that you can do and the way you can explain it and how the value can add, in most times, I'm confident that it'll surely exceed that amount. Whether it's looking at ways to balance a contract or maybe creating some more incentives that benefit you if you do certain things, achieve certain goals or milestones. These are the things that an attorney who understands the way the scene and the business works will maybe try to negotiate for. But if you don't have someone in your corner trying to do it, then you're not going to even have that conversation and it just won't be something that could potentially benefit you.
Is there somewhere you want to end up as an esports lawyer? Do you want to be the best at something, or is there something you'd like to focus on down the line?
I mean, I think that the biggest thing is just becoming just an expert in the field where people that want someone who knows what they're doing, understands the business and the legal, and really has the connections to make things happen. I don't think that it's possible to be the best lawyer. I don't think that's like a real distinction. I'm a super lawyer rising star for the last 5 years. So, that's as pretty close as it gets at that point. But I think ultimately it's all about your clients and people wanting to come to you and them recommending you. And I think at the end of the day, if people in the industry have a good reputation and think, oh, that guy Justin, he does great work, we enjoy working with him, like that to me, I think is the biggest value, is to be someone that my peers respect and that the talent and other people in the industry want to work with.
Sometimes when I talk to esports lawyers, I get the impression that it's definitely dynamic and it feels like the laws are being wrote up as we speak. Do you think the governments have kind of, I don't know if it's the governments, but do you think the legal parties have caught up? Do you think there should be an organization that takes lead here? And so the third part of the question is, have you seen situations where things have gone wrong or a mistake has been made?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely think that there's a lot of times, even contracts that I've seen where like there's a contract where the team can terminate it at any time for any reason and the player can't terminate it ever. And I read it and I'm just like, you sign this? And then I see their other 10 teammates and they all sign the same deal. So I think that a lot of the biggest issues that's come about is that players are just so eager, especially the younger, more inexperienced ones, who are most of them, especially when they enter the field at the beginning. They're just so excited to get paid by a team, to get the jersey, to really kind of embark on this career, something that they've been dreaming and working towards for who knows how long, that they just kind of blow all caution to the wind. They just are ready to accept whatever they're given. Some of them may think that there is no bargaining or negotiation power and that they just have to sign what they're given, or that it's not worth them trying. To me, I always say, like, they call it negotiation for a reason. If they call it take it or leave it, then they would just say that. And there's been situations where people have like, this is our agreement. There's no wiggle room. This is what it is. And then you have to assess if you're willing to accept the agreement as is, or if that's not a situation you want to encounter. And my gut always says is, if someone's not willing to work with you, not willing to take reasonable feedback and try to make a deal that you feel comfortable with, that's probably not where you want to be. That's probably not going to be an advantageous relationship. And if things go down a negative path, which, as we know, the real world, these things happen, it doesn't seem like they're going to have your best interest at heart. So I think the biggest thing that I notice is players signing agreements that they don't really understand. They don't understand the long-term ramifications or what it means and how it's going to impact what they do down the line. And then regarding the government, I think that the logistics of the way esports is set up is it's just really hard to impose anything, because there's no one game that everyone plays. There's no one competitive body. It's just all very disjointed. So what I've seen, especially in like the tier 1 and tier 2 orgs, is the development of kind of not a template, but just like a standard set of clauses and information and verbiage that's used by most of these teams. I mean, it just so happens a lot of the teams, especially in North America, their contracts were created by, a similar attorney. So a lot of things have evolved from that.
Yeah.
But even with some of the more franchise leagues, like the Overwatch League and the Call of Duty one, the different franchises started to have very similar agreements with a lot of the language that if you signed to Seattle, if you signed to New York, there was just a lot of similarities in them. And then as you have more of these bigger entities, the Robert Kraft and their attorneys start becoming part of the equation, these agreements just continue to evolve and kind of intensify, and they start figuring themselves out a little bit more.
So where do you sit on the debate for player unions?
I think it's a tough one. I obviously understand the pros and cons of it. I think that ultimately it might not be worth it for everyone. I think that realistically, a free market gives a lot of flexibility to talent and teams. It gives the teams the flexibility to pay what they feel is worth it based on the return that they feel they're going to get. And it lets the player kind of negotiate for his own fee. Like, if I have double the amount of followers than you and everyone wants to buy my jersey and join my stream, I'm probably more valuable than my other two teammates. Does that necessarily mean I should make the same amount as them? I don't know. That's kind of one of these things. Do I think that overall the player and talent need more people in their corner, more people advocating on their behalf? Definitely. Whether it's, players association or just, attorneys, agents, managers, just anyone that just has a better understanding of the business and the agreements that they're signing, I think will be beneficial. So I don't necessarily know if it's through a union or just a players association, like the ones that they've created themselves. Like I know CSGO has created one, and Fortnite, and they've tried to implement different things to protect the players at large, try to sanction tournaments that don't pay players or pay them late. So I think that's a good thing. I think those are things that organizations and unions can probably do on behalf of their players. But the collective bargaining aspect and trying to impose salary caps and these kind of tiered things that a lot of the professional sports, especially in America, have, I think will probably be a bit problematic and may end up backfiring, because some of these teams may have to pay substantial more amount and incur costs that they were not expecting, and they may just have to cut bait and drop a lot of players or drop teams in general. That's like, okay, well, we can't spend $3 million on this team anymore. So I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that evolves, because it is such a hot and sensitive topic. But ultimately, I think that if you're a player and you're in a position where you're trying to grow a long-term career, you need to protect yourself and not, worry about a union or a potential union, negotiating and advocating for you.
I think your answer leads on to a similar line as what I discussed with Nepo in the first interview we held as a journal. Who's a lawyer in Germany, and he described that setting laws in Germany are quite focused on protecting the employee or the player in this case. Do you think America has such a protectionist attitude to employees, or do you think more care has to be taken there?
I mean, California, especially recently, has really revamped their whole entire labor law system and really kind of is what he was saying, where it's very much employee focused. Like the presumption is almost that anyone that's doing a job for you is an employee, and you have to pretty much prove otherwise that they're an independent contractor. And there's a whole big thing with Uber drivers and Lyft because this whole status change would have through the whole model that these on-demand car services have, where if these guys are employees, then they have to pay health insurance and 401ks and unemployment and all of these other kind of statutory imposed obligations where they wouldn't have to if they're just an independent contractor. So I would say California in particular has invoked these really strict laws, and it's really applicable to esports because a lot of teams are based in California. A lot of the biggest publishers are in California, and just a lot of esports and gaming competitions and work in general happens in California.
So two-part question from following on from that. If California is arguably the strictest in America, which state do you think has the most relaxed situation? And following on from that, it sounds like it's different in different states. So therefore, would you be comfortable advising in other states, or do you think lawyers have to stick to their state?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, labor and employment law is a very specific kind of law, and it's not as widely known. And each state has different laws. So realistically, the best practice is to talk to an attorney in the state that you're operating in, because he will have the most familiarity with that specific state's law. I think that most states have protections for the talent, the employers, the employees, because that's just how it has to be. There has to be certain protections to protect the people that just inherently have less leverage and less bargaining power. Certain states probably tax you less. Their laws might not be as one-sided as I would say the California is, where there's this heavy presumption that if someone's doing a job for you, they are your employee. So realistically, it's really a case-by-case, state-by-state analysis, and an attorney who specializes in that area is definitely the best person to contact.
Fine. So we're in a pandemic. We're still in the pandemic. How has that changed your workload or the cases that you see? You kind of alluded to it before about immigration.
Yeah, I mean, immigration and all these events is just kind of stopped. So there's no travel. So there's really no foreign non-US citizens coming over to America to compete because there's no competitions. Everything's really shifted to online play where you don't need to be physically anywhere but your home or your gaming house or whatnot to participate. So that definitely has been really just put on pause because no one's able to travel, especially not internationally. And there's really no live events, so there's no need to really travel. But what I would say is that since then, the other side of the coin is things have really accelerated. I think once the entertainment world's starting to see, oh, wow, we have no movies, there's not going to be any new TV shows, there's no live sports, we can't go out to a nightclub, like all of these other entertainment facets that really dominated most people's lives were just stopped. And all that left and just continued was, esports and gaming. And it really kind of proved the model and what I've been working on the last few years to some of my colleagues from the more traditional entertainment and sports world. So, I have these musician clients that for like the last 2-3 years, I was like, you should get on Twitch. Like, this is great for you. Like, you don't even understand. And now, 2 months later during this, 2 months into COVID, they're like, oh, we're making $1,000 a month. We have all this subs. Like, we're giving mini concerts and bringing on our friends. And it's amazing. I'm like, I told you so. And, I feel like that's really what COVID has done for the gaming world. It really has that, like, I told you so moment, that this is real. There's hundreds of millions of people that love this. You have celebrities and athletes and rappers and, the influential people in society today. This is what they do. This is a big part of their lives. And usually these people are really too busy for you to really see it or for them to really focus on it. But if you're an NBA player and you're quarantined for a month, like, you work out and you play video games, like, there's really not much else you can do.
I didn't see of it like that, but now it's starting to make sense why there has been so many celebrity endorsements, because they probably now have fallen in love with the game all over again. Now, if that's indeed the case.
Yeah, they just have more time to play. Like, if you're on the road, city to city, going on planes, like, you can't sit there and play Xbox all night. But, if you're at home and you don't have anywhere to go the next day, you can hop on Warzone and play it all night.
So I wanted to talk about research. Are you involved in any research at the moment with regards to esports law? Do you think that's something that we need to do more of? Can we do more of it?
I think that the esports law field, especially on the more academic side, is still really developing. I was really interested to see what was going to happen with the whole Tfue lawsuit. I thought if that actually started to become actual litigation and people started to actually proceed with it, it would have been really interesting to see how the chips fell. But obviously, as I predicted and thought, it ended with them settling out of court because realistically, neither party, especially the teams, wanted a judgment one way or the other. It's one of these things that happens in the music world where, like, you may be in an infringement lawsuit for copyright infringement and you may just settle it because you don't want it to go through the court and have it set precedent, and then every other situation follows that. So I think that the academic side, especially in the law field, is still really developing. I think what's really interesting is looking at just the different avenues for revenue and the way teams are branching out from their traditional sources, whether it's, tournament winnings and sponsorship money and merchandise, to actually opening up gaming facilities, starting their own league in Flashpoint, and really trying to be more entrepreneurs and use the brand equity, that brand power that they have, to expand. And I think that that's really unique, just to see the way people are making these dynamic business decisions and really how that's changing. And then also kind of looking at kind of the investments and where they're coming from, and maybe getting more information on where they're actually going to. I think that that would definitely be a really unique side of the industry, is studies on, are any of these people actually getting returns on investments? Like, we see these 20, 30, $40 million deals with all these teams, but what does that actually mean? And I think that's one of these things we're slowly understanding, but there really hasn't been any true academic research or information on that.
I think you've hit the major pain points the major gaps that we have in our knowledge of esports as a sector, actually. But yeah, it does. I would love to hear answers to that. We've actually covered everything I wanted to cover, Justin, pretty rapidly. Is there anything you wanted to talk about or discuss?
Absolutely. I mean, something that's really exciting is obviously what we're doing over here with the International Journal of Esports. I'm really excited to see, as more universities across the world and as more established professionals start taking notice and contributing, I'm really excited to see where it grows and what issue 2 and everything else, from there goes. And then on a more personal note, I actually have a textbook coming out at the end of February, The Essential Guide to the Business and Law of Esports and Professional Video Gaming. It'll be available everywhere on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and everywhere else that books are sold. And I'm really excited about it because I feel like it really pushes the academic side of esports and the business side in particular forward.
That sounds amazing, Justin. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And any aspiring professionals out there, feel free to reach out. I love to mentor and try to help impart whatever wisdom and knowledge I can.
Thank you again.